All right. And so the next thing we're going to do is connect to Facebook.
Alrighty.
That's always a journey.
Yeah, sometimes it works. Sometimes. Are you using StreamYard?
No, I do it direct through Zoom, which I had thought about. I'm talking to you about that later,
Okay.
but all right. Thank you again for joining us for another great Money Monday. As always, I am your host, Rosalind Brown, and our goal tonight, as every Money Monday, is to provide you some actionable insights on your financial independence journey, whatever that might look like. And so, right now, I know so many people are either overworked, overstressed. They are looking at, am I going to have to go back into the office? Am I going to have to fight with somebody for a promotion that I deserve because I've worked 20 hours a day? And so you are in that place and you're trying to decide, okay, what's next for me? And so this is the time to see, okay, is there something else that you can be doing? Is there something that you can put in place? Is it a break that you need? And so many of us are saying, goodness gracious, we just had this long weekend and it was still not enough. And so we have a great host with us tonight. We have Shar Wynter, who is a social entrepreneur, travel enthusiast, and advocate for the expat lifestyle. She's equipped with insights from her career break experiences and travels to over 50 countries. She is on a mission to inspire others to live authentic, free, and abundant lives through travel and living abroad experiences. Inspired by the untimely death of her father, she quit her corporate job in 2019 to embark on a life changing career break. This journey ultimately led her to create Xpat Inc., a digital platform for global community and lives abroad. Make sure you download that app, Xpat App. In 2020, the company launched the Xpat App, which currently includes over 1,400 members representing more than 110 countries and territories across the globe. The Detroit native currently resides in Lisbon, Portugal, where she spends her spare time scrapbooking, exploring, and investing in passion projects. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to our hostess with the mostest.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rosalind. Really appreciate the intro. Can you all hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. And I should be able to share my screen, right?
Yep. Mhm.
Okay, cool. Let me just pull up the presentation. That way everybody can kind of see as I talk. But really appreciate everyone joining. And I'll try to keep this within about 30 minutes so that we have 30 minutes of questions. Because I really want to make sure I am answering the questions that you all have and providing very, very useful insights. Okay. Um, doesn't look like it's showing. 1 second. Share screen. Okay, here we go. I'm like, wait a minute. Can you all see the screen?
Yep, we see it.
Great. All right. Just wanted to make sure it was coming up. Okay. So, as Rosalind mentioned, my journey started as a result of my dad passing away, and it just forced me to really reevaluate my life, just look at my priorities, the type of lifestyle I was living, because he died right before retirement age, and so it made me reevaluate this idea of waiting until retirement age when I'm 60 something to finally start living my life and enjoying the fruits of my labor. So I'm going to kind of walk you guys through the journey, but I really want to provide some just super practical tips for anyone who's in that space where you need a break. If you need courage, inspiration, or just resources, I'll share that along the way. So we'll get to questions at the end. And feel free, do they have somewhere in the chat where they can drop questions? Okay, awesome. Feel free to drop questions and we'll try to get to them. It'll be a quick presentation. So Rosin's done an excellent already review of my bio. So I'll jump actually right into what to expect from this discussion. So I want to leave you all with some insights about what a career break is, because there's so many different terms that are tossed around. People use the word sabbatical. Sometimes you hear the term gap year, and sometimes you hear a mid-career break. I kind of want to explain the differences between these various options so that you go into this with an open mindset and also an informed mindset if you are interested in taking a career break. And then I'll talk about some key things to consider because when it comes to finances, housing, the timing of your career break, it means everything. And also thinking about those things like insurance, which is always really important. And then I'll provide some practical steps. And after this, I'll be able to share a link you guys can download. It's a free guide that I've created to just kind of help walk people through like writing things down. I think that's a really, really important part of this process is to be intentional. And I think one way to be intentional is to write things down. And then last, I just share some random insights and tips just from my lessons learned, things I wish I would have thought about, and just some advice I wish I would have had before I started my journey. So I'll briefly walk you all through my career break journey, and then I'll go into some more details about the different types. So I started my career in 2009 as a technology consultant. I was working with Deloitte Consulting. It's one of the big four consulting firms. Super high burn career, constantly traveling in various clients. And so it was I want to say like the first year I was drinking from the fire hose. I was exhausted from day one and I did not think I would make it. I ended up staying there for 10 years. And so at the time I wanted to quit in the very beginning, but thankfully I had a female mentor and she actually graduated from the same school as me, Spelman. And she was my like unofficial mentor, but like really just, she's the reason I didn't quit. And she's told me just stick it through and be resourceful and all these things. So I'm pushing through the first year, made it over the hump, still exhausted the second year. Okay, so work was getting a little bit easier, but I was still exhausted. And what I meant by exhausted was it wasn't really just the nature of the work I was doing, it was also the microaggressions. I was working in technology, in financial services. And so, not represented, of course, it was very few of us around. And that over time, you don't realize it until you leave the environment. It really, really weighs on you. And I don't know if anyone else can relate to that of being in a space or an industry where you're underrepresented and you deal with microaggressions all the time. It's like a constant from the day when the day starts with clients and whether it's writing on the airplane and things like that. So I took my first mini career break in 2012. And what I mean by a mini career break, I took 1 month off. I was terrified to ask for 1 month off. Okay. And I had 5 weeks of paid time off, vacation time accrued. And I was going to actually lose it because the way it worked at Deloitte, you could only carry over for 1 year. And even though this was work that I had, or PTO and vacation time that I had earned, I was terrified of asking for this time off because it was an entire month. But I went for it. I took that month off. I actually convinced two coworkers to come with me, and we took a trip around the world. Delta had this round the world trip, so that was my first mini career break. When I came back, the reception and like everyone was just so excited about what I had done that it actually ended up helping me in my career. And what I mean by that was whenever I was introduced like on teams and things like that, people be like, oh yeah, and she's a world traveler, like kind of snarky, but at the same time, it was a conversation starter. So I'm sharing that insight because I thought that taking that break, that 1 month was going to ruin my career and it actually helped it. About I did that again every year until I went abroad to London. I went abroad to London in 2014. And while I was in London, because London has a different philosophy about work-life balance, I never had to take a full month because they just don't work. I shouldn't say they don't work as hard. There's more work-life balance there, and so I didn't feel as burnt out while I was in London. So I was there in London for 3 years. Came back to the U.S. because it was just a temporary assignment, and immediately, once returning to the U.S., felt like this is not for me because I got thrown, but after being exposed to this lifestyle where like I could live a little bit more freely and have a little bit more balance, coming back to America, things that I could bear before, I couldn't bear it. I was like, man, this is unbearable. Like I'm stressed out all the time. I'm tired. So it's one random day I'm at work. This is in 2017. And I'm like, I want to quit. And so I just go to my boss. I'm like, hey, I'm going to quit. It was so random. It wasn't planned. I didn't have a talk set up or anything. And so he's looking like a deer caught in the headlights. And he's like, okay, it sounds like you need a break. So he encouraged me to take a sabbatical. I had never looked into sabbaticals. So the sabbatical option, for anyone who's unfamiliar, it's an agreement where you kind of have not a guaranteed job when you come back, but you're taking a paid, well, in my case, sorry, paid leave. It's not always paid. And with the understanding that you're going to come back to a job. Okay. So that's why sabbatical is different from like just actually a gap year or quitting your job. So I was leaving, but it was on a contract that I would come back at some point. For me, it was 6 months. Um, a lot of people tried to discourage me from applying because they said no one ever gets sabbaticals. Well, I looked up the manual, the employee manual and benefits, and I made sure that my application was proper, like I had checked all the boxes. So after all of that, they denied it. I was like, are you kidding me? So I'm like, how are you going to recommend that I go take the sabbatical and then deny it? So when I asked for the reason why I got the denial, it was some BS reason. And so I got the employee handbook back out and I went back and forth with HR for at least 3 weeks because I knew that I was eligible. And the reason that they gave me was BS. And so what ended up happening is they eventually had to grant it to me. And they were doing some other funky stuff with the dates. And I'm like, no, I'm due for 6 months. That's what I'm going to take. So I took my full 6 months with 40% pay because that was a part of the deal. And I spent that time volunteering. So the sabbatical went nothing like what I thought it was. I volunteered with the youth development program. I wanted to give back as a program I worked with before. And when I tell you, I was so exhausted because it was so much work. And I love the program, but it was so much work. It wasn't a real break. So I went back to work still tired. Um, Fast forward to 2018, my dad passed away. And that's when I just started aggressively saving because I was like, I can't do this anymore. So even though in 2017 I had started saving a little bit when I first thought about quitting, in 2018 I started saving aggressively. And I'll go into details about that later about what that actually looked like. But my plan was, as soon as I hit my milestone for like the amount of money that I felt like I needed to take my gap year, and I wanted to just revamp my entire life, move back abroad. I was like, I'm quitting. So it was based on my timing, was based on how much when I hit my budget that I had set. I finally quit my job in 2019. So this was, another year later. And I started on a gap year. So that was October 2019. And everything was going great. I was traveling, I was living my best life. And then COVID hit in 2020. At that point, I was in London and I decided to just stay in London for a while. But then COVID like kept going and I was like, okay, this is getting expensive. Like I'm sitting here in London in a studio and this is not fun. So I already had a ticket booked for Lisbon. I just changed the ticket to move it up, went to Lisbon, and I was like, oh, this is my new home. So that's how I ended up in Lisbon. I had traveled to Lisbon before. So throughout this journey, I kind of skipped over a lot. But like while I was on a gap year, while I was stuck in London, kind of just with nothing to do, I started investing in like classes because I was like, well, let me just do something with my time. I took a class to learn how to build an app. I took a class about blogging, and I just started doing these things because I needed something to kill the time because we were, on serious lockdown. So when my gap year was up, October 2020, I had to make a decision. Like, do I go back to the workforce or do I try it on my own, take a leap of faith into entrepreneurship? And by that point, the community that I had been building with this extra work that I had been doing on the side for the Black expat community that lives abroad had been growing. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take a stab at entrepreneurship. So that is where I'm at now. I'm a pretty new entrepreneur in the sense that it's been just a little bit over a year, but it all started with me taking that leap of faith and taking that career break. So I know that was a really long-winded introduction, but I wanted to walk you all through because there's so many different types of career breaks. I really wanted to walk you all through what that looks like at various stages. So before I start, everyone always says, oh, I want to talk about the money. They want to talk about the timing, the insurance. I want to talk about the first step is mindset. Before you even think about planning a budget, before you think about timing, insurance, where you're going to go, what you're going to do, get your mind ready. And the biggest thing is getting over fears. The fear is probably what has kept you where you are for so long. And I thankfully had a professional coach, ironically provided through my job, that helped me get over this hump. And I had a therapist, and she's phenomenal. The reason that they were so key with the mindset aspect, the reason that I was staying at Deloitte, at that company, even though I wanted to quit, I was holding on to a financial insecurity from my childhood. So I grew up in a household where we were in a lot of debt, single parent household. My mom, immigrant parent from, Jamaica. And so, it was the scarcity mindset of always feeling like my livelihood depended on this job. And because of that, I couldn't see my life outside of attached to this job. And the professional coach and therapist helped me walk through that. And that was a major step of this whole process because the fear kept me from doing things that were like very small moves, right? I wouldn't even start a side hustle because I was like, oh, what if my job finds out about it and then they fire me? I just wouldn't do basic things because I was so afraid of losing my job because I had tied it to my livelihood. And things that were no longer true, even though I was in a different financial position from my childhood, I couldn't let it go. And so they helped me kind of uncover that. So my question to you all would really be to start with, if failure was not an option, if you were guaranteed to be successful, what would you actually attempt to do? And this is not a quote from me. I don't know who wrote this quote, but I really love it. But I just wanted to include it because I wanted to start with that, to put the fear aside. So once you get your mindset ready, the next step really is to understand what your options are. So you have a gap year, sabbatical, or a mid-career break. Now, depending on where you are in your life, what your circumstances are, and what your budget and timing, different ones make different, make more sense. So a gap year, that's traditionally something that people use to refer to like students and people who are younger, but I use gap year for adults as well. And a gap year is really taking a year-long break before or after college or university. And this is where students can engage in like various activities such as travel, volunteering, or whatever. More and more, you're seeing this term used for adults as an adult gap year, which is the mid-career break that you see kind of later on here. But that involves like permanently ending your employment for purposes of making a career change or a major life transition. And then in the middle, you have a sabbatical. Now, the sabbatical is an agreement with your employer to have a specific period of time off work, but there's an understanding that you're going to come back to work upon return. So the reason that I put all three of these out is because I know we may have students on the call and we may have people who are a little bit later in their career or mid-career. And I just want to explain the terminology because it gets thrown around so loosely, and it's really important to understand the differences between the two. One of the key things I would say that's the difference is job security. Out of all of these three, the one that has the most job security, which there's never 100%, but the one that provides the most job security is sabbatical, because you'll normally sign a contract and it'll state that you are coming back and you'll have a position when you come back. Um, the gap year, of course, no, because most of the time you're in between, and then a mid-career break means you just quit. Now, flexibility. So even though the sabbatical may seem more promising because you have a job still at the end of the day, let's just say you aren't as free to do whatever you want to do. Because at the end of the day, if you have to go back to this job, there's certain activities that you can't participate in because it would violate the rules of your agreement with your employer. So that's another thing to consider is how much freedom do you want when you take your break? And then another key area is to think about the flexibility of when you can take the timing and take the time off. If you do a sabbatical, your job and that contract is going to dictate how long. I had the luxury of technically extending my adult gap year because I wasn't on sabbatical. This is the second time around. I wasn't on sabbatical. I could do whatever I wanted to do. I could say whatever I wanted to say. And that's why I started the Expat Chats platform where I was interviewing Black expats because I finally felt comfortable talking about race publicly, and this was something I was not comfortable with before, when I had my job. So just some things to consider. There's a lot of trade-offs. In the guide that I'll send you all, it has a full chart. So I'm not going to go in full detail, but you'll be able to see a full chart of the pros and cons and just things to consider, because you want to make sure you understand what your options are and then what the benefits are of each one before you embark on a career break. Okay, and then the next big step is to defining your goals. So one key area, I actually, because I've spoken about this before, I've had people reach out to me, and some of them have had really horrible experiences on their gap year or their career break or whatever you want to call it. And the more I talk to them, I realize it's because they didn't have an intentional goal. They were just tired and needed a break. But they didn't think about what they wanted their gap year to look like, what they wanted to accomplish. They were just so tired that I think sometimes we take for granted the luxury of leisure time to think, because it's a luxury, right? To have leisure time to even think about and plan something, right? And so if you don't plan, you're kind of just letting the time go by And yes, you had a month or two. This particular person I'm thinking about had 6 months off, and they felt like they accomplished nothing. They did nothing. They said I spent 3 months decompressing and then 3 months preparing to go back. That's not how you want to spend your break. Okay. And just to give some insight, 3 months decompressing and just that is a very accurate. It took me 3 months just to acknowledge that I wasn't working anymore and I didn't have to feel guilty for not doing any work. It takes time. I know it sounds weird. You're like, oh, I'm gonna love it, but it takes time to sleep in, to rest, to not check an email. It takes time to get adjusted to your new lifestyle, to that break. And everyone doesn't need a year. Some people need 6 months. Some people need 3 months. Some people need 2 years. So it all depends. But one key thing to consider is if everything went according to plan, when would you want to start your career break, right? If your budget was on point and everything, like think about these things. How much time do you think you need to fully enjoy whatever it is you plan to do, right? Because not everyone's going to go abroad and travel. Some people are going to stay at home and maybe learn yoga. Maybe you're going to start taking salsa classes. Maybe you're going to spend more time with your kids. There's so many different things that you can do. You can't define it by anyone else's timelines. You have to think about what makes sense for you. And then the other thing is think about which experience makes the most sense, right? Because if I'm taking a gap year or versus a sabbatical or a mid-career break versus sabbatical, I'm going to approach what I'm doing a little differently, right? Because some of these have restrictions on them, whether it's time or whether it's the type of activities that you can do. The next key step is to make an actual plan. So once you understand what your goals are and you write down your intentions and why you want to take the break in the first place, then make a plan. And by making a plan, I mean a financial one, making one from a time perspective, and actually thinking about what are the key things that I need to make sure I take care of while I'm away or while I'm on this break. So, some key questions to consider, like what type of lifestyle do you envision having during your break? That was so important to me. I wanted to be free, I wanted to travel, and I wanted to make sure I was staying somewhere comfortable. So, whenever I travel, I don't believe in living somewhere that's worse than my everyday living, right? So, I had to pay for that. My budget needed to match my lifestyle that I desired to have on my break. So that's just something to consider. What do you want to experience or what do you want to do? So I thought I was going to be this getting into shape yoga girl. Did not happen at all. Okay. It was so far from what ended up happening. But in my mind, I thought I was going to be on some like eat, pray, love in Bali and learning yoga, finding the love of my life. Just foolishness was in my head, like foolishness looking back. But at the time, I really thought I was going to be on this eat, pray, love journey and I was going to be fit and lose all this weight. Because I would finally I used to tell myself if I had the time, I would work out. It was a lie. So that was just one thing to consider. Like, what do you want to do? Our experience. Where do you want to go, and how will you get there? This is important because again, it goes into the budget. Are you flying? Are you taking a train? Are you doing slow travel? Are you doing fast travel? What does it look like? And then, what do I want to learn? For some people, they're like, I don't want to learn anything. I just want to chill for once. I want to relax. I want to go to the beach and I want to sip margaritas every day. And that's perfectly fine. But if you want to learn something, what do you want to learn? What are things that you've always wanted to do, but you've not made time for? This one was so important to me because there were so many things that I wanted to do. I wanted to share my travel photos. I wanted to start my life as a travel blogger, which lasted for 3 days. So many things I wanted to do. So these were all things that I wrote down, and I knew I wasn't going to get to everything, and so I prioritized it because, like, I wanted to trace my family history, and I wanted to find a new place to live. There were just all these things. I never got to the tracing family history part, but we did a little bit. But I did find a new place to live, which is Lisbon, in Portugal. And then this number 6 is really important because this is about like what major responsibilities do you need to end and maintain and then delegate elsewhere, right? There's so many different things. So like for me, I needed to end my job, maintain. I don't have a mortgage, but I had a car note still. And then voting, I know it's going to be abroad. So having to set up like, okay, would it go to my sister's house or would I send stuff to my mom's house? And then delegate elsewhere. Redirecting mail was to my mom, and then storage was to my friends because I had storage friends in London and storage in Michigan as well. So these are just things to think about because, especially when it comes to the mail, your responsibilities, voting, and things like that. If you have a mortgage and you need to find renters, it's an important consideration, right? So when you're making your plan, you can't make a plan and leave those things out. And then thinking about how much time do you need to accomplish your goals in the things that you want to do. That's always a tough question. How much time do I need? I'm going to be honest with y'all. The 1 year was not enough. I felt like I could have done two, three. Like, you didn't get bored? No, I did not get bored. I actually felt like I needed more time. Um, but I mean, everyone's different, right? So you have to think about your situation. And if you have children, you may only be able to do a summer, right? Because when the children are off school or something like that. So things to think about. How do I fund my career break? And what type of lifestyle does my budget provide? That kind of ties back to number one. Um, I saved aggressively. Like I went into beast mode saving. It didn't even make any sense. I moved into a studio in Atlanta. Instead of the luxury SUV that I used to have, I got a used truck. And I mean, I cut down my expenses by so much by those two key things. And then the other thing is, I used to travel a lot, like kind of expensively, or spend a lot of money on it. And I had to cut back and start using my points, hotel points, because I used to travel for work, hotel points, and like travel points from airlines and things like that. So I had to like really cut down a lot. Yeah. But I was saving a lot of money every month, and it was going directly to what I was calling my quit fund. And then when do you plan on starting your journey? So going back to the funding topic, because that's always a really big topic when it comes to the planning. I had three buckets. The first bucket was my emergency fund. You always need to have an emergency fund, I think, regardless of what you're doing in life. The second bucket was what I called a quit fund. And that was going to be my gap year fund, pretty much. Like once I hit this amount, I can quit. And then I had a third bucket, which I was kind of like, if I don't fund this bucket, it's okay. But that was my business bucket, like business fund. I did not know at the time what type of business I wanted to do, but I always said that if I ever have a business idea, I don't want to have to wait on anyone to lend me money to execute. And I am so glad that I did that, because that's what enabled me to so quickly launch the Xpat app for the community that started to build while I was on my gap year. So how much you need in each of these is up to you and your lifestyle. But for me, I had 6 months in the emergency fund of a comfortable lifestyle. I had 12 months of a comfortable lifestyle in my gap year fund, because it was for a whole year. And then I had in my business fund, it was the equivalent of my emergency fund. So yeah, that was set up. And I mean, of course, it takes time, right? This wasn't, my emergency fund was already, before I started saving for my gap year, my emergency fund was already set. But the money I raised in those 3 years was for the quit fund and for the business fund. You may not even need all that. Figure out what your numbers and what your needs are. Because again, everyone's gap or career break may not be to start a business. That's stressful. It's stressful. I'm just gonna be honest. Like it's stressful, okay? Especially if you're an entrepreneur. You don't know what you're doing half of the time. So YouTube University, that's what I'm a student of right now. Um, and then the next step is taking the leap, right? This is just really just once you've made the plan, do not like get scared and not execute. Once you, I sat on my resignation letter for a month. I'm not kidding you. It was in my drafts email box for a month, because I was afraid to actually send this to someone, like if you, I don't know why. I had saved the money up, reached my savings goal. I was so amped once I finally reached it. And then I was too afraid to hit go. Do not do that. I could have quit a month earlier. And so it got an extra month pre-COVID, if you know what I mean. So looking back, I mean, you really got to take advantage of these things. So just some words of advice. Step outside of your comfort zone. If you're going to go and save up this money and, quit your job or take a break from your job, make it worth it. Don't just dip your toe in, jump into the water. Seriously. Like, don't just like make it worth it if you're going to do this. You don't know when in life you'll get this opportunity again. So my whole thing is go all in, go all the way in. Number two is it's good to revisit your goals pretty often, and don't be afraid to adjust like how you get there. Like be committed but nimble in how you get there, right? Like be committed to the goal of, oh, I want to improve my health, but maybe how you get there may not be yoga. It may be improving your mental health. It may be eating better, and it may be walking every day. You get what I mean? So you're doing these things where you don't have to always like the path or journey or the route you're going to take could look different, but you're going to get to the same place. And the third one is just keeping in touch with family and friends, but definitely make new friends along the way. I say that because you start to become a part of communities that are, what's the right word? they're more aligned to what you're doing. You may join some digital nomad communities, you may join some travel communities. It'll really enhance your experience and save you money to be a part of these communities because they always know they have like resources. They know what sites to book or how to find accommodations, just things that can enhance your experience. So I encourage you to take advantage of community and building and being open to building a new community wherever you decide to do, whether it's through yoga or let's say you want to read and, or you want to dance or learn a new language. Start building that community, and you can start that before you actually go on your journey. Number four is oh yeah. So your journey may inspire others. So be sure to take time to reflect and share. One of the reasons, and Rosalind, thank you for this platform because the group is awesome. I couldn't believe it was only open for a year. When I started, I was like, well, already 3,000. That's awesome. So thank you for that. For having and for even creating a space to share. And it's so much knowledge in this group, right? And there's so much community. Take advantage of that and share your story. You really, truly never know how you can inspire and change someone's life simply by sharing your story. I was inspired through my mentor. She's younger than me. I took her blogging course because, again, like I said, I was bored and I was like, well, I might as well do something with my time. And if anyone knows Glow Autonomo, that's whose course I took. And her course really is what inspired me to be transparent, to step outside of my comfort zone, and to start sharing my journey. I had dealt with so many things. I had dealt with bouts of depression in 2018 after my dad died. And I wish I would have shared that journey with people. I was dealing with a health issue myself, which made me paranoid, thinking I was going to die and I had a tumor. It was just so ridiculous that I didn't share because once I did share through that course, the number of people that reached out that were also dealing with similar things, who thought they were dealing with it on their own, you know what I mean? Like you could really, really help people by sharing your journey. So that number four, I think, is the most important out of all of them. And I know if you're an introvert or if you're just a private person, probably not your style, but I think there's some value in that. And number five is to just keep an open mind and heart because so much of my journey was unlearning things, unlearning a lot of things, unlearning the fear, unlearning the scarcity mindset, unlearning just thinking I wasn't good enough to be successful at things that I was going to try, right? And that is probably the most rewarding part is when you look like over back at the year and I'm like, I'm so glad I took this leap. I'm so glad I started putting myself out there. I'm so glad I started building this community. It's really empowering, but you never know if you never put yourself out there. There's a quote that this guy named Marty Woodward shared the other day. He said, most people aren't afraid of failure, they're afraid of public failure. And I thought that that resonated with me so much because that's actually what kept me from sharing and from building community and doing all these things I wanted to do. So just don't be afraid of it. The failure is a part of the process. So, I mean, as you can see, my gap year was like completely interrupted by COVID and you just have to adjust. And then number six is about growth. So growth is always uncomfortable, right? Well, not always, but mostly it is. And so while you're on your journey and if you feel discouraged or stuck, just remember why you started. Go back to why you started. And that's why I said write things down. Be intentional and write things down. When COVID first hit, I was like, wow, the one time that I quit my job to travel the world, there's a global pandemic and all travel is halted. Like, in what world does that happen? I was so irritated, but I had to get out my little pity party because what happened with the pandemic is it forced me to be still. I have been hopping around and staying busy and not really sitting with myself and acknowledging the things that I really needed to work on. And I was going to probably go back and be tired still, the same way I did with the sabbatical. But the pandemic forced me to be still, and that forced me to learn and grow and reflect and do all these things. So, like, it was uncomfortable, of course. I even went through a whole thing where I cut all my hair off and shaved my head bald about 1 month into COVID because I was over it. But it was a liberating journey, and it was really uncomfortable. I mean, yeah, a lot of especially with the hair part, because I had my hair relaxed my whole life. So I didn't even know what my natural hair looked like. But now I'm so glad I did it and it's very liberating. So like embrace that growth, embrace those moments of change, and create a safe space for yourself to change. And if that means you need to let go of certain people or just set up some boundaries, where maybe during your gap year you don't communicate with certain people to protect your energy, that's okay. You can do that too. So if your growth requires letting go of certain people and spaces, go ahead and do it. So I talked a little bit over 30 minutes, but I hope we have time to answer questions because I really wanted, like I said, I wanted to walk you all through this. There's, like I said, I'm going to give a guide at the end where you guys can kind of just walk through some of this stuff. But I wanted to leave time for questions because I really, really want to make sure this is useful for you all and I'm not just talking about myself and my own journey. So I hope that was helpful.
Yes, indeed. You got a bunch of questions that came in while you were talking. One of the first questions it says, what kind of activities were limited while you were on sabbatical?
Oh, so because I work for a consulting firm, I could not do any activities that people would pay for my client. I mean, for my job. So, for example, I could volunteer because Deloitte doesn't offer mentoring and tutoring students as a paid professional service. But let's say I wanted to help a company with their marketing strategy, launch an app or something like that. I would not have been able to do that because companies do pay Deloitte to do that. So it would have been a conflict of interest. So that's an example of some of the activities I could not do.
And then this is a good question. And a lot of people always think about this and are concerned about this. How much travel insurance should one get if only going to be gone for a couple of months? Should they rely on insurance through their job? Or if they're not coming back from a job, kind of what's that insurance thing? I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't know what's going to happen. And I definitely don't want anybody just to kind of throw caution to the wind and just jump out there. What's your best advice there?
Yeah, I would say please budget for health insurance. So, for anyone who's unfamiliar, if you work for a relatively large company and you quit your job, they are required through a law called COBRA, COBRA, to extend the option for you to still participate in their health insurance coverage, but they will not subsidize it anymore. So, for example, I was previously paying around maybe 200 a month when I was working at Deloitte for like really good healthcare with, I think it was, I can't remember, United, I think it was. When I quit, that same exact plan without Deloitte subsidizing it was 750 a month. Insane. This is why timing matters. There's an open enrollment period for Cobra. It starts in October. You have to make a decision sometime in October. And then by January, you can take a new plan. But if you quit, when you quit, you have to continue the current plan you're on. So when I quit in October, I had to pay that 750 for November and December because open enrollment, even though I could select a new and cheaper plan, open enrollment doesn't become effective until the new year. So for 2 months, I was paying 750, which is ridiculous for the same insurance I was previously paying 200 for. But now that I quit Deloitte, even though they were still extending the insurance plan to me, and Cobra lasts for up to 18 months. So after that, I downgraded, of course, to a cheaper plan because I know I was going to be traveling, and the cheaper plan ended up being 250 a month, and it was horrible coverage. It pretty much was pointless. The reason I'm sharing that is because even though I was traveling and all these things, I still had to have some health insurance coverage. Health insurance coverage and travel insurance coverage are not the same. People get them confused a lot. Through my credit card, when I booked a flight, I had travel insurance coverage through Chase Sapphire, but that was not the same as health insurance. If I need to go to a gyno appointment for my annual and all those things, my travel insurance from Chase Sapphire did not cover that. Additionally, something to note, your travel insurance from your credit card, it only up to 90-day stays. If you stay beyond 90 days, they are not going to cover you if something happens. So for me doing this long-term travel that I was doing, the Chase was not enough. And so I ended up using Trawick International. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, Trawick. And I think I was paying around, I started doing it so that I put it towards whichever, wherever, like London only or Portugal only. Because if you try to do everything coverage, it gets really expensive. And I think it was around 40 to 50 a month. But I never had to use it, so I don't know if they were good. But I've heard from other people in the travel community, the digital nomad community, of Safety Wing has a $40 a month coverage that's pretty decent. I haven't used it myself, but I just have heard from people that it's pretty useful. I think you may be on mute still, Rosalind.
Yep, we got another question. It says, is it better to stay in a hostel, Airbnb, or temporary apartment? And she's wondering, does it matter in terms of, timing? And of course, I guess you may not want to do one if you're going to be there for 6 months or so, but I guess even in that transition period. So if you're going to go to London or Lisbon or whatever, should you go ahead and find that month-long apartment, or should you say, goodness, I'll get a hostel or an apartment or an Airbnb for a few days to kind of decide where you want to land?
So it depends on your lifestyle, but I am not a hostile person. I just require too much. I have OCD, so like staying with other people. I recommend Airbnb, and what I recommend doing, for one, do one with the flexible cancellation policy, because something like COVID, of course, but also just do like 1 week. And then once you get there, you can negotiate with them offline. So that's what I ended up doing, because Airbnb takes a pretty decent amount off of people's benefit, you know what I mean, like how much they're making. And so if you just do like a month or so, and then, or maybe just a week, whatever, make sure you actually like it first. And then I just in London, especially because COVID hit, they were just happy to still have someone staying there, and so I negotiated a much cheaper rate, like much much cheaper, like a third cheaper so than what was published. And so that's how I handled Lisbon. Portugal was interesting. I had previously stayed at a location in on booking.com. I like booking.com a lot because I can just filter on reviews. And then you can only review a place if you have actually stayed there. So that's really helpful. And I went and spoke to them in the previous year when I had come to Lisbon and asked them how much for 1 bedroom. It was like 1,500 a month. It was out of my budget. I came back during COVID. It was 700 a month for a 1 bedroom, a nice one too. So yeah, COVID also impacted the prices, which worked in my favor because I was able to secure at the time. This was last summer, a pretty decent, nice spot for 700 a month, well, euro. So, but still under 1,000 US, and it had everything I needed pretty much. Actually, except for they didn't have a washer and dryer unit, but yeah, it's I kind of go with, like I said, Airbnb for long-term stays, because the reason a hotel gets kind of funky if you're going to be abroad is eating out every day gets old really quickly, and you will get fat, and it's expensive. So I'm just telling you to think about these things. It's expensive, and it's just so, like, having a kitchen and all those things, Airbnb more than likely, or if you could do hotels. I mean, it's just, I think hotels get old after a while. So I recommend Airbnbs for the longer stays. Yeah.
Girl, we getting fat right here. We ain't
I
gotta
know.
go.
Look, I have a whole kitchen. I keep eating Uber Eats. All my money went from Amazon to Uber Eats. Like,
Like, we don't need a hotel for that. So it says, did you have to pivot at all with the money that you saved?
yes, I absolutely did. So what ended up happening is my money was budgeted based on living in London as my base during my gap year. London's heck expensive. Like, it's a lot. It's really expensive. But I wanted to be in London. I want to be based in London because you can fly out very cheaply, in London to other locations. My friends were there because I previously lived there. And I just love the vibe of London. I'm like, you know what? This is a good base because I did not want to be in the US. This is all pre-COVID. Once COVID hit and the social scene got cut because, you couldn't do anything, London lost its allure real quick. I was like, oh, I'm not loyal. I left. I was like, okay. I was there for about 3 months, well, 6 months total, but 3 months into COVID. And I ended up in Lisbon because I already had plans to come to Lisbon. It was on my list for one of my new countries to live in, but I could live in Lisbon for half of what I could live in London. And so what that meant was, if I was spending, say, for example, I'm just throwing out random numbers, like 5K a month in London, I could live for the same lifestyle for 2.5K in Lisbon. So what that meant for my budget was it could extend my gap year further with the same budget, but extend it further. Some of the things that I did not consider, I would probably say, in regards to budget wise, when it came to like having to change it, like trips home during COVID, because now you gotta pay for like COVID tests. My COVID tests weren't covered from insurance, and it's just little stuff I just didn't think about. I think for the actual, like, I think I covered my housing, and because I had airline points, I didn't just factor that in as much as I should have. So that was a cost that was a little bit more. And then when it came to the business fund, I actually used some of the money in my business fund for professional development. So like classes to, like I said, learning how to code, learning how to blog, or taking a blogging course. And lawyer fees. When you're opening up a business, starting a business, oh my gosh, you need like trademark and attorney fees, if you're bringing on a founder and co-founder and all this stuff, it's just expensive. Attorney fees to me have been the biggest expense that I did not understand how much it costs. Because I don't have a legal background, so I can't rely on my own knowledge. So these are things that when I say I had to adjust my budget, yes, I've had to adjust the budget from the perspective of I paid way more in legal fees than I thought, including trademark and stuff like that. And I didn't realize how big of a business knowledge gap I had. And so having to take courses to like kind of upskill myself is something that I didn't anticipate as much. Yeah. Oh, I think you're still on. Oh, there you
Now,
go.
this is a good question. It says, what's something that you were shocked to learn while on break? Any useful websites for side hustles that you would recommend as well? And that would be another thing in terms of any restrictions on making money as you're on this gap year. We know if you're on the sabbatical, but as you go from country to country, anything that people should be prepared for or aware of as well.
So it depends on the type of visa you're on when it comes to restrictions. Not every visa allows you to earn money and work. I know that sounds crazy, but so as a tourist visa, I think some people may have seen that story about the young lady in Bali who she had posted about like how to move to Bali and all these things and how to make, how cheap it was to live there. She was selling like an ebook or trying to sell an ebook. And that's illegal because she was on a tourist visa. And so they kicked her out of the country. So you have to be really careful. I did not, how do I say this? The company that I started is registered in the US, is not registered in Portugal. And because Portugal, oh gosh, it's so complicated. I'm here legally as a resident on a residency visa, but because of COVID, they canceled our residency permit appointments. So technically, I'm not a resident yet, but I was admitted as a resident, if that makes any sense. So you can't earn, I mean, once I'm officially resident, you can earn money as a resident or whatever, but a lot of places don't want you earning money full time as a tourist in that country, if that makes any sense to what I'm saying. But if you are earning money from home, from your business at home, you can do that because you're still a resident in your home. So it's not like you can't earn money at all, but you really need to be clear about what type of visa you're on. Don't overstay, because what overstay means is just, let's say I entered London on a tourist visa, could only be there for 6 months at a time, and I stayed 8 months. Now, because of COVID, yeah, they've been giving people like, some like it's cool, whatever. But non-COVID conditions, they can fine you and then they can deny you from ever coming back to the country for a certain number of years. So it is penalties to it. It just depends on the customs agent or the agent that you get. Some people let you slide. Some people will actually like, oh, you overstay, and they will fine you. So fines are something to think about. And then how you can earn money is something to think about too. Yeah.
And definitely check out our YouTube channel. Katrina gave some good tax tips if you're an expat, so check that out.
Yeah.
One other thing, someone asked about getting started. So you're going on this gap year, you're going on this sabbatical. Did you just purchase a one-way and you were like, I'll figure it out later? Or did you do a round trip and you were like, okay, I'm going home on this date? How did you figure out which one was going to make the most sense?
Getting started. So I had to figure out what the base was going to be. I wanted my base to be London. So I had a one way to London. And then once I got to London, because I had this flexibility of like, I had no work or nothing. I was just, anytime I saw a flight deal, booked. Anytime I saw a flight deal, booked. And so, I got a flight deal from London to London to Sweden, round trip for £9.99, which is about 13 US dollars. Insane. But when you're not working, you can travel on a Tuesday at 8 a.m. You know what I mean? Like, so it offered a lot of flexibility. I'm not a huge planner when it comes to travel. So I was literally booking things. Like I had so many tickets booked. Whenever I saw a cheap flight, I would just book it because I had the flexibility to do that. And unfortunately, when COVID hit, like it was a disaster because I had all these cheap little tickets everywhere, with Ryanair, EasyJet. And KLM and all that stuff. And so when they were giving people just credits back. So I have like all these little random credits with these random airlines. It's quite frustrating. But I did not have my return ticket back home, but that's because I have a lot of travel miles with airlines. And so I always knew I could go home if I needed to. And then the Portugal one, I just moved that one up once. They were talking about closing the borders to Americans. This was last summer. And so I like, let me change my flight so I can get into the country before they officially enforce the rules.
I think that goes another question that was in the chat about how much stuff to bring. So to be kind of nimble and just kind of up and go, did you take 2, 3, 4? I've seen people, they got like 5 suitcases. How much did you pack? Is this 2 carry-ons? Is this check bags? What does that look like?
So this is an excellent question. Pack light, emotionally, physically. Just you do not need as much stuff as you think you need. I had stuff everywhere. Thank you to my friends in London who have been keeping my stuff and they still have my stuff. My mom, my sister's house is ridiculous. And now I have stuff in storage in London. I mean, here in Portugal. I got that out once I got back here. I never needed as much stuff. I've never not had some. I've always overpacked. But I had 2 really big luggages. I had a carry-on, like luggage or whatever, and then at my friend's house, I had some other stuff. So I had too much stuff. When I came back the second time, because at some point I had to go back to the States for some residency purposes to get like applied officially for my residency visa for Portugal, and then I came back, and that time I just had like one big. No, actually, I still think I brought the same amount of stuff. I'm about to lie to y'all. I brought the same amount of stuff. Don't do that. It gets expensive and it's exhausting. And you can buy like I brought foolish things one of the times. I'm not gonna say which trip because it was so many different trips. Like bedding. Bedding takes up hella space and it is super available everywhere in the world. You will rarely go somewhere and not be able to find some sheets. So it's foolish to bring them. You just don't need to bring them. Towels. You can find towels anywhere. So there's, just things that I think about that I brought. I was like, you didn't maybe bring one towel and some rags, just because when you first get to a place, they may not have it, but you don't need to bring a full matching set to match your, it was just foolish stuff. The other thing that I think that I did bring that didn't make sense. I hate wearing heels, and I brought heels. I was like, why did you bring these heels? You're not. Where are you going? You're going to wear flip flops. Like Lisbon's a walk. Well, I get time. I don't know about Lisbon, but my whole point is just think about what you're bringing. One of the things that I did when I was moving to London the first time, so this is going all the way back to 2014, I brought electronics. They use different voltage and different what do you call like adapters, whatever. So that made no sense. So just really think about what you're bringing with you, and you can just leave most of the stuff at home. Yeah, I would say pack light, just as light as you can. Yeah.
You like one check bag, one carry on.
One really really big luggage, and definitely have I feel like you should always have a carry on though. Like always have a little handy dandy carry on for those if you like to
I don't
travel.
trust some people with my luggage. I gotta have a few days of
Oh yeah,
clothes
important stuff.
on me.
Yeah. Yes. So one thing that I did that I actually thought made sense. I have a big vision board at my mom's house, right? It's huge. Like, I wish I had a good comparison. But anyways, I took a photo of it and I put it on a small scrapbook so that I still have it with me. But because I wanted to carry my vision board on my cat here. It's too much. Even if I had rolled it up, it would have been too much. So sometimes you just have to find ways. Even like just having a photo album, maybe of like your family or whatever. If you're a very sentimental person, you just feel like you're gonna miss people. You used to have FaceTime and all this other stuff, but just find ways to make things smaller and not carry so much stuff. Yeah.
Shannon asks about Cobra. She says, is it always higher? And I will say, I read something the other day, and don't quote me, but just kind of Google it in your own time. Some of the kind of COVID information, you may be able to get some kind of credit towards your Cobra premiums. Don't quote me, Google
Okay.
that on your own time. But that might be a benefit of COVID. You can check that out, and there might be some benefits there. But she's just want to know, is the Cobra going to be a lot higher versus some other outside insurance?
So you should, I wish there was a way. I can't remember if there was a way for me to see the prices before I quit without letting them know I was going to quit, right? So, because it's actually very dependent on, it's company specific. There's not like a Cobra rate and then whatever. It's like there's for Deloitte, for this plan with this company, this is the non-Cobra rate, like what Deloitte normally, is going to be subsidizing and paying some of it. And then this is what you are going to pay in full if you're not working for the company anymore. So I wish I had better advice, but I know that I found out about the prices after I gave notice, which is why I was like, ooh, 750. I was like, yo, I'm about to risk it all and just be out here without insurance. And then I had to talk to myself, and like, that's not smart. Um, and I wouldn't take risks with insurance. Like, I know some people are like, oh, I'll just figure it out. I don't know. That's just one area where I just wouldn't take the risk. Um, and maybe, yeah, you're right. It's hard because you have to talk to HR to get the prices and stuff. But your HR should know, and confirm that your company offers Cobra, because there's a certain requirement for the number of employees you have to even be forced to offer Cobra. So some companies don't offer it, and they messed my Cobra up because they did not give me open and semi-open enrollment papers. So I had to fight with HR. So I'm like, hey, I was eligible for open enrollment because I wanted to get cheaper rate and go back and forth with them for a while. So stay on them. Open enrollment is in October, and if they don't send you the forms, make sure you can talk to Cobra directly. I mean, not Cobra, there's a agency that handles all that stuff, but make sure that you don't miss open enrollment, because once you miss open enrollment, there's no other period where you can enroll in a cheaper plan.
And definitely, if you don't want to talk to HR today and tell them you think about quitting with the Cobra numbers, check out those other resources, because at least you can say, all right,
Yeah.
this is an option. I know these numbers. And if Cobra ends up better, I can go with the Cobra option, but at least I have some quotes in my back pocket. So you don't have to call, HR today and say, hey, next month, I'm going to give y'all notice. I'm trying to run these numbers. You don't have to do that. And Shannon says Cobra is always higher in her experience.
Okay.
So it might just be beneficial to not even bring it up and just go ahead and price your own stuff. Another good question. It says, what's the greatest lesson that you learned during your gap year?
Ooh, that's such a great question. Greatest lesson, greatest lesson. Maybe, oh, I think one of the I'll say most surprising, because I learned a whole lot of lessons. Oh gosh, life is short, so just don't always think you have tomorrow. Not to put like a fear of urgency, but you should have a sense of like, why are you waiting? Power and transparency has been a great lesson. I always, I think it's kind of that whole cultural thing of like, don't air out your dirty laundry, and wanting to like not let people know about your failures, your concerns, the fears, and all that stuff. It's actually quite powerful to put that stuff out on the table and to announce it, and you own it, right? Because there's this quote that says like, whatever fears you don't own, they run the show behind the scenes anyway. So it's like, you might as well just own them. But also, I was very shocked at the amount of community that I found. There was just a really strong sense of community from other Black women that through this process surprised me. I thought it was going to be super catty in this entrepreneurial world, and it has been very supportive. Just the support from other Black women who are either on this journey or starting the journey or have been in this journey for a while. It's been very, very, I mean, Rosalind, even meeting you has been really great. And I just appreciate, like the community. I think I underestimated how important the community would be on this journey. And so one of the biggest lessons is just to like appreciate the fact that we have internet and access to community and resources, and take advantage of that. That has surprised me the most, and probably been, and just trust yourself. Like, you'll be fine. Trust your journey and know that you are more than capable. Like God or the universe, whatever you believe in, didn't bring you this far to just drop you off. Like, all right, cool now, like you'll be rewarded for, I think when I say you'll be rewarded, like you will be, I think you'll find it fulfilling to take the risk. You really will. And it's okay if things don't work out 100% the way you planned them. I mean, my stuff looks so different, but it looks even better than what I envisioned, to be honest. So I think it's worth it.
And I mean, definitely meeting you. I think we were supposed to have a quick chat, and we were on the phone like an hour and some change. First time we talked, it was like the evening for you or something like that, some crazy hours. And definitely just to connect. And there's so many people that are going through the same exact thing that you're going through, or that same thought. And it's so much more that connects us than we have in terms of differences or comparisons and all those kind of things. So I was just like, yes, I'm looking forward to this one. And just that transparency. And we kind of talked about, I've shared a whole bunch of stuff in terms of like my crazy family and all the things that have gone on in the last year for me. But I think one thing too, in terms of someone asked, what is one thing you didn't bring with you when you moved abroad that you wish you had known to bring? And so maybe it's, the adapter or
Definitely my adobo seasoning, because my food has not been slapping because I haven't been able to find that here. And then almond oil, which I put in my hair. I just love the way I found some. Actually, just bought some almond oil today, so I'm gonna test it out and see. But yeah, like I think like because of COVID, things that I didn't think I needed to bring because I thought I was coming back home. So like bathing suits and things like that. So I looked crazy last summer because I had to like go buy cheap clothes from like Primark, because I had all my summer. I left in the fall. I had all my summer clothes at home because I had planned on coming back for someone's getting married, coming back for a wedding, and I was like, okay, on the second trip I will bring all the summer clothes. But when COVID hit and interrupted, and I lost that trip back. I shouldn't say lost. I decided not to go back because I didn't want to get stuck in the US. I was like, I'd rather be stuck in London than the US. Um, that's how I ended up not being able to have like summer clothes. So I wish I would have just brought, even if it was like one or two bathing suits, maybe for the summer. So maybe just oh gosh, it's such contradictory information because it's like on one end it's like have a variety of things just in case of emergency, but on the other end it's like don't bring too much stuff. So it's like it's hard. COVID
don't
really
finish the
changed the game.
whole season. Just
Yeah.
piece it
Yeah.
together. And I will say one thing that I learned,
Mhm.
I am not a little girl.
Mhm.
And so one thing I forgot to pack was bras. And I'm notorious for forgetting something like
Mhm. Mhm.
important. And so I remember going to Hong Kong and I had no strapless bras. And I met a girl in one of the travel groups and she was from Hong Kong. And so she says, I'll take you to the mall. And I can see them talking. And the guy looks over at me. I was like, I don't think he got a bra for me.
I don't think they got it wrong.
So if you are a bigger girl,
Mhm.
your unmentionables, pack those. And
Yes.
then one thing I found, Asia let me know that you weren't meant to be here. Cause even then I was looking for shoes and the guy looked down at my feet and he was like,
Oh, I
so,
get it.
so
Yeah.
if any of those apply to you, make sure you pack your unmentionables. You may not be able to find them depending on what country you're going
Yeah.
to. And then like certain just basic shoes. So things like water shoes or, flip flops or, those kind of things that you might think you could just pop into a store and get.
Oh yeah, and I should have brought my patience because man, whoo, I love me some Portugal, but you need patience because it's like the gift and the curse of being in a country that's super laid back. Is like administrative wise or logistical things. I mean, you can forget about it. Like a response to an email, what is that? Like so. I should have brought more patience on the journey. I'm super impatient, and yeah, that's something that I think you need to just be equipped for because things rarely will go 100% the way you planned them. So just be patient and trust the journey because some things happen and I'm like, ooh, I'm glad that happened now in retrospect because it saved me from a certain situation. But at the time I was like, oh man, I'm stuck here. And I'm like, no, you actually needed to be stuck here so you didn't get stuck here, if you know what I mean. So things all happen for a reason. Just trust the journey and be like of service to other people along the way. And by that I just mean like if you can share your journey, maybe you don't want to share it real time, but maybe just journal so that you can share along the way. You never know who you can help.
And then this is a good question. How long should you stay in one place? I know you were in London for a period of time. You've been in Lisbon for a period of time. You hopped around. Were those more so vacations and Lisbon stayed your home or London stayed your home? How did you decide when to pack up and go, or is it just pack up a small bag and go?
Oh, so London was my base initially, because at the time I could stay in London for 6 months at a time, and then every time you leave the country, it resets that 6 month visa, so or tourist visa. And so what that meant was, when I would take these little trips to like Sweden or Oslo or wherever I was just hopping around wherever I could find a cheap ticket. It was resetting my 6 months every time I left and came back. So London was my base, and so like if I went away for 3 or 4 or 5 days, it was just to like go to check out a new country because I wanted to do a lot of travel. When COVID hit, I stayed put in London. But then I started to get to that 6 month mark again because, I didn't plan on being there that long. All those flights got canceled. And so I was like, I'm actually moving up. Let me go to the next destination I went to, which was Lisbon, was where I was going to be living. So I'm a resident here. Well, trying to get my residency here. Yeah. Once I get my appointment for my residency permit. But yeah, here is home though. I'm established here. It's just with COVID and this residency permit appointments getting canceled, you just have to wait. It's a waiting game. So, but in regards to how long you should stay in each place, man, it really depends on what you're trying to do. Because if you, let's say, for example, you're going to a particular place because you want to participate in something that's unique there. So let's say I keep bringing up yoga because in my mind, I really was going to do this yoga thing. If you go to Bali and let's say like there's a yoga program there, then that may dictate your time. If it was up to me and if COVID had not happened, I would have been hopping around at least every 2 to 4 weeks, probably, just because that's how I like to travel, and that moving around doesn't bother me like that. But I would have had my things based somewhere in like London, like a central location, so I could always come back somewhere centrally located. Yeah.
And did you have any visa issues going from country to country? Not everybody who's going to watch this is probably from the US. So that's, I know
Oh
that's
yeah, you should
for
consider.
you.
Yeah, so that's the thing that's really important. When I was hopping around in the beginning of my journey, I was on tourist visas as an American. So what that meant was like I went to Senegal, fine, you could get a visa on arrival. I went to Togo and Ghana. For Ghana, we had to get our visa in advance, and you have to get a shot. Oh, sorry, please. Okay, so that's in the little booklet I'm going to share, the little PDF. Understand entry and exit requirements, especially now with COVID. Understand vaccination requirements because we needed yellow fever for I was going with a friend to Ghana. We needed a yellow fever for Ghana, and you had to get your visa in advance, even though some people said they didn't. They got there and they were fine. And then like for Sweden, Oslo, those were in Prague. I went to Czech Republic. Those were all like visa on arrivals in the sense of tourist visa. Like you don't have to get anything in advance. You can just go in and out. The other thing too is if you are already in the EU, in European Union, and I guess London now is not, UK is not anymore. You actually, like when I went between Oslo, Sweden to Oslo, to Norway, they didn't even check anything. So traveling between, but that's what I say. It's such a toss up because it depends. Yeah, depending on where you're coming from, your place of origin, and where you're going to, sometimes they're just not checking. So, but I wouldn't bet on that. And don't think about doing visa runs, especially right now with COVID. A visa run means when someone like they plan on being somewhere for a year and they just do like a visa run by like just hopping over to a new country to reset their visa, but they're planning to be there for a whole year. Like I said, my plan was to be based in London for 6 months and then somewhere else for the rest, but COVID kind of threw everything off. But anyway, my whole point is with COVID now, visa runs are a lot more difficult because the options and borders are opening and closing so quickly, like literally overnight. Like for Lisbon, between Lisbon and the UK, and for Americans, they like closed that border literally. It was like less than a week, and it was closed. And I just got lucky when I got in, to be honest. So it's something to think about, to really plan out and to be flexible. If you book on Booking.com for your accommodations, you can book a cancelable, free to cancel. And if you book on Airbnb, some of the options are free to cancel as well. So actually on Booking, only some are free too, not all of them, but you can filter so that you only book things that are free to cancel. And that's why I think put some flexibility into your plans, especially with COVID, because COVID just kind of threw a wrench in everybody's things right now. Yeah.
We had
Mhm.
another question on how you chose Portugal. And I know you talked about when you visited, you just knew it was home.
Yes.
How did you choose? Like, what does that feeling feel like?
Mhm. So when I first visited Portugal, it was back in 2017. We came here for a friend's birthday. It was a group trip. I loved it. I felt at home. I was like, oh, I belong here. I don't know what it is. I have no connection that I know of to Portugal. Like I don't have any Portuguese in my family. My middle name is Antonia though, which is so random. But anyway, it's just interesting because I felt, and I had at that point traveled to over 40 countries, and I had never felt so connected to a place. And so I loved it so much that I even stayed longer. So my friends went back home. I stayed and did some solo travel here by myself after they left. And I was like, oh, I love it here. The gelato, the seafood, the weather, the people are welcoming. It's a walkable city. I love walkable cities, meaning that you don't have to have a car. This is for Lisbon. Their public transit is good. I find the people here to be very graceful. So even though I don't know Portuguese fluently, very minimal at that. Well, back in 2017, I didn't know any Portuguese at all. They are very accommodating, and thankfully, I appreciate that. Because not everywhere you go, people make you feel like if you are stuck language-wise, they'll help you out. So that was another thing. And then when I started to look at the cost of living, it made it really attractive to me because for Western Europe, the cost of living here is reasonable for a nice quality of life. So like I said, for the equivalent of where I'm living now in UK would be twice as much in London. So all of those reasons really made it like a no-brainer for me because I still have access to the rest of the EU. They have a very reasonable entry process for the residency visa. So anyone who's interested, look into it's called a D7 residency visa. And given that I was on a gap year when I applied, I got in off my savings. So like, it's not a crazy amount of money that you need. And it seems very like, I think my process took 4 months for approval. Yeah. From when I apply officially to when I actually got approved for on the residency visa. So there's two steps. Residency visa first, which gets you into the country as a resident, even though tourists may not be allowed from the UK or from the US. And then you have the residency permit, which allows you to stay for 2 years. You can renew it for 3 years after that. Yeah.
And then in terms of a housing lease, Michelle talks about that's one of the things that's required to get the visa. I'm guessing she's talking about a residency visa.
Yeah.
How did you go about that? Is that negotiating maybe with some locals, or is that through kind of that Airbnb connection? How did you go about that?
Yeah. So the first time when I first came and didn't know all the rules, I didn't realize I had signed a fraudulent lease. So that 700 euro lease a month, it wasn't official because you actually need a tax number called a NIF. NIF that's a tax number that you have to have or whatever. And I didn't have one, so I don't know how that lease was even valid. But where I'm at now, there's a real estate agent that I worked with, and the guy who owns this place, because he's not Portuguese, I think he was more open to leasing it to me with just 1 month's deposit. But I had to show them all this stuff, like like your saving, pretty much everything I have to show for the residency. So it just depends. I would encourage people to work with a reliable real estate agent because not every single person that's leasing a place is going to require a financial guarantor, which it sounds like what this person is asking them to do. But you have to work with a reliable real estate agency, and I didn't have to have a financial guarantor, but I did have to give 1 month deposit in order to secure the place that I'm at now. And it is, to me, always better. I have a real estate agent I can recommend too. So if anyone needs, I can share those details. Actually, I'll just share her name. Just look up Achille Simo, Simo, and Achille, and then Simo. She's on Instagram, and if you message me on Instagram at Feed Me Slant, I can connect you as well. But she's phenomenal. She helped me. She's also a Black female as well, and an expat also from Cameroon. So there's that connection there with the community.
Yep, somebody just dropped it in. I'm gonna drop it into the chat too. So if you're looking for a place, definitely always great to do business with somebody that you can trust. Because unfortunately, like you signed the fraudulent lease, but it still worked out for you.
Well, I did lose some money because I had to get out of that lease. I had to go back to the States for a little bit. And yeah, they were like, we see a crack in the table. They just made something up. I was like, all I do is eat tea, drink tea, eat on the table. I didn't crack on the table. But, I couldn't argue with them because, so that's a word of caution. I guess a cautionary tale. Again, because I don't know the language, I was just signing stuff. Do not do that. Yeah, do not just sign stuff in foreign languages. Use Google Translate. It wasn't obviously a real lease because if it was, it would have, they would have needed my NIF. And then the other thing is, if you make these agreements with people offline, like for example, when I made the agreement for Airbnb, offline from Airbnb, I actually did sign, that was in London, I did sign a contract with them as well. So just be mindful of what you're doing. But yeah, once I had to I guess you can say leave early out of my lease for the previous place I was in. I didn't get my deposit back. So yeah, that was annoying.
And I will say, if you are looking at places and you're on the fence, you're trying to figure out where, or you're trying to make connections,
Mhm.
we talked about it a little bit earlier, but make sure you check out the Xpat app.
Yes, yes.
And you can actually look by country and connect to people. So, regardless if you're just visiting or if you're saying, goodness, I think I might want to live there. Shar, you said it's how many countries?
Yeah,
110
we have
countries.
we have representation from 110 countries and territories. And that just means people who either their home country or where they've lived abroad at. But physical presence right now, I think it was like 73 last time I checked, like where people physically are right now. The 110 counts where we previously lived or where we are now and where we come from, like our home country. So yeah, I was actually quite surprised because we've only been live so for anyone who might have missed the beginning, the Xpat app is an app that I built for the Black community that lives abroad. And this is for the global Black community. So not just Black Americans, but, Africans, people who are Caribbean, wherever you're from, if you're from the diaspora and you live abroad outside of your home country, the app is for you. And we also invite like partners and things like that as well. But it's a great resource. The goal of it is to serve as a directory. So as Rosalind mentioned, you can literally type in like Mexico or Ecuador or other places, and the profiles of people who have that listed will come up. So you can find people, because I know a lot of times what I was seeing in the expat communities and also in the travel communities, people like anybody in Mexico, anybody in Lisbon, and so now I'm like, just go to the directory. As long as people's profiles are updated, you'll be able to connect with them and you can message them in the app. We do share like job opportunities, sometimes like remote job opportunities and upcoming chats and events, so you can kind of hear and get insights from other expats as well.
The great thing is people will put where they currently live. So that's great to be able to connect if you're going to be there. If your mama is like my mama and she like, you going to be out there by yourself? So you can be out there by yourself. But two, if you're just thinking about it and you're trying to explore and you're like, I don't know what it's like, you might be going to a country and you're like, I don't know how it is for Black people. And that's
Yes,
what
that's
it
why.
could be.
I mean, that matters, right?
You
And
want to
we
know
do
that going in. You might want to know you
exactly,
might not want to be on a certain side of town, or
exactly. Yeah.
words that you might not know the meaning to, that you might need to know the meaning to as you get there. And so that's some of the great resources that are there. So definitely download that tonight. Check it out. Look me up. I'm on there as well. And so we can connect there also, but set up your profile. So if you are just looking, you are kind of trying to decide where you're going to go next. Maybe you're just going to take that sabbatical or gap year. It's a great place to go and do your research too. And this is some good unbiased research about people's actual experiences as they've kind of moved around through their expat experience too.
No, I love that.
But
And
it
just
talks about, is there racism in Portugal?
oh yeah, there's races. So for anyone who wants to know, there's races everywhere. So I think the difference though is where the racism in America is quite lethal, meaning like deadly, right? Abroad, I find it in most places, from my personal experience, has been, it's like microaggressions or just basic ignorance. Maybe not getting great service at a restaurant, or maybe someone like watching you when you're in the store trying to shop, but not like, oh, police can just come and shoot me. You know what I mean? Like these type of things. It's quite different from what the worst racism I've experienced has been in the U.S. Like hands down. And but Portugal has its issues as well. I mean, they're the original colonizers, so those roots are still here. I actually went on an African Lisbon tour this weekend, which was amazing, telling us about the history of Lisbon and I'm sorry, Portugal, and the connection with Africa and the slave trade and everything. It was phenomenal. So anyone who's interested in learning more, if you're coming here for a visit, check out the African Lisbon tour. It's on Instagram. So it was a great experience. But yes, there's racism here, but they're more classist than racist. You'll find that in the UK as well. And really what that means is, because you're American, you're seen as American first and then the Black part second. So they see dollar signs when they see Americans normally, meaning that they're going to treat you well because they assume that you have a certain class and you have a certain amount of money. So that's why I think I get treated better than, I'm sure, what the Black people who actually live here get treated. But it's not until I open my mouth and say something that they realize I'm not from here, because the Black people here look like me. They look like all of, I mean, like we all look alike. And what I mean by that is, it's because of the diaspora and the slave trade and things like that. You can't tell the difference of a black person in America to a black person here until the person starts speaking. But yeah, racism is definitely still here, but nowhere near. I mean, yeah, it's
And it's a
nowhere near.
damn thing, but
Yeah,
that's real because
yeah,
unfortunately racism is everywhere, but there are spectrums.
yeah. Definitely a spectrum
As a
because
girl from the South, there's spectrum.
man, I'm telling you, the U.S. I mean, one day I will share my full story because the U.S. will have you effed up for real. And
And it's
that's
probably one of the main reasons we need a break. That's probably
yeah,
the main reason why
yeah.
we're like,
Um, I
yeah.
don't know, I have stressed it enough, but when I tell you, I think I am adding years to my life by taking this. When I took that career gap break, my mental state improved so much, my peace of mind, just little things. Even like, I know this sounds crazy, but like the love handles on my back naturally started to go away. And I think it's tied to stress. And I just, it's so many things that you don't realize the weight of it until you release it. You don't realize how abnormal the treatment that we have in the US is until you are not there for an extended period of time. And so many things that we normalize or that we become desensitized to that are not normal. It's nice to be away and know that, like, nah, I don't have to live my life this way. So, from the perspective of people who do want to get some mental clarity, I do highly encourage specifically Black people to leave the US for a period of time and give yourself the opportunity to. Not everywhere is a utopia and oh, it's all rainbows and things like that. But there's a level of peace that I have. When the police come by or whatever, I do not get anxiety about the police here. I did not get anxiety about the police in the in the UK. In the US, it could be something basic as me driving. If I see a police officer, I'm tense. My body's physically responding. So I just I don't feel like that anymore. So it's total difference. Even yesterday we were walking and not all of us in our group had our mask on. They just pointed like, like put your mask on. But it was a very casual exchange, no aggression
Like
at
what
all.
other people would get treated here versus
Yeah. So it's interesting. But yeah, definitely peace of mind is probably one of the biggest benefits I have had of from the break and from living abroad.
now, is there anything that you miss about being in the United States?
Oh, my beautiful family. Yes. Spending time with my grandmother, my sister, my niece and nephew. I miss my nephew's birthday and Mother's Day because I unfortunately until I get my residency permit, if I leave, I can't come back in. So waiting for that. But yeah, I miss my family because I'm really close to them. And especially like, the older people and the younger people, like the kids and my grandma. Um, things change a lot, at this stage. And so I really, really miss them. And normally I would be at most major, like, holidays and things like that. So missing like my nephew's birthday or missing Mother's Day is like a big deal for me. So I 100% miss that. And I miss Jamaican food. My family's Jamaican. They don't have Jamaican food here. So we have African food, but you know what I mean? It's not that 100% the same. So
But
yeah.
definitely, especially when you talked about the difference in stress. And I've often kind of reflected about the craziness that my family went through from a health perspective on last year and learning so much about stress and strokes,
Yeah.
especially for Black women. And it really started to kind of change the perception on life and what's important and what guides you. And
Yeah.
so, definitely, if you are watching this and you're like, I don't know, like, I don't know, tomorrow, Tuesday, it's only a 4-day week, and I still don't know if I can do 4 days. It may be time to one, check out the Xpat app, but also, Shar, you have something to share with us as you're planning that gap year or that sabbatical or that just mental break.
Yes. I will share the link to it's a like I said, it's a free PDF. I'm not collecting no emails, nothing. Y'all just take it and live freely. Ignore the coaching stuff at the back. At one point I thought I wanted to be a life coach. I did a couple sessions and I was like, I hate this. I'm not good at it. So I do have that on there, but you can ignore that. But yeah, the hopefully the PDF can help you all. Like I said, write things down and be intentional. Seriously. That's one thing I will say. Like if you can carve out 30 minutes for a week to just kind of start strategizing and thinking about what you want to do, The other thing too, don't let people fool you thinking it's some overnight, ooh, I just hopped in, quit my job. No, it's planning, planning, planning. It does take time. Don't get discouraged because you're on day one. I was on day one in 2017. You know what I mean? Like everyone's at different stages of their journey. And when you see everyone's highlight reels on IG and all that stuff, sometimes it can make you feel like you're behind. Why do I feel like, oh, I just heard a noise. When you hear all these noise on IG, it makes you feel like you're behind. But don't forget, like, you're seeing people's highlight reel and you're also seeing their day 3,000. So acknowledge that it takes time. It just takes time. It really does.
I think that's big. So many people are thinking about it, wondering if they can do it. I think it feels out of reach for so many people. And I had somebody not too long ago kind of going through the numbers, and especially as you're looking at different countries. I live in Washington, D.C., and what I spend to live in Washington, D.C., you could live somewhere else for a third or fourth of it. And so when you're running your numbers and you're like, ain't no way I can retire here. Well, no, not here.
Yeah.
But even if it's not retire, even if it's taking a break. And what I love about your story is you said, I thought I was gonna be a yogi and do that all day, but I tried it. I didn't want to do that. I thought I was gonna be a blogger, tried it, I didn't do that. And so there are so many things that are in us, and we're like, oh, I could do that. And you never get a chance to try. You never get a chance to see, is this something you love or something you would be great at or something that you could make a new career out of? But you never get a chance because you are so weighed down with the obligations of your 9 to 5. And so if you could take that off and say, I tried it, didn't like it. I tried that, didn't like it.
That's okay.
You be more fulfilled.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful things come out of like knowing what you don't want to do also, or what you're maybe not good at. So I think like the fear of people thinking like, oh, I don't have enough money or whatever. Please do the numbers, like just do the numbers. And what I mean by that is literally go on let's say you are interested in moving abroad to Mexico. Go on your phone to the country you're interested in, go on Airbnb and look at how much it costs. I mean, like, you know what I mean? And look at like, would you be comfortable staying somewhere like this and start, that's how you start to get a feel because my budget changed so much. The very, 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 very first budget that I set was super low. And then when I started doing the numbers and looking at how much it was going to cost me for Airbnb in London, I was like, oh man, I don't have enough. So then I upped my budget for my gap year, for my time to save for my gap year. And then once I actually started my gap year and COVID hit, and I realized like, I could extend my gap year a little bit if I just go somewhere cheaper. Because I wanted to keep, one thing I didn't want to do is be uncomfortable. So I was like, I can keep the same lifestyle, like, live somewhere nice with air conditioning and all these little things. Because in Europe, like these buildings are old. So like things that we take for granted in the US as a given, such as air conditioning, washer and dryer, central heat, may not be a given abroad. So just something to think about and consider as well when you talk about budget, like budget for lifestyle, right? What is your lifestyle that you want?
And then be ready to embrace the culture. So you
Yeah.
might have to be like, I got enough AC. I'm gonna make it work. I mean, I always hear that people complain when Americans come about ice,
Oh my gosh.
ice girl too, but I mean,
Yeah.
everybody.
Small sacrifice, like no ice racism. Like, yo, I'll take the no ice. Like, you really can weigh it out.
You have to get them old school ice. Put that in your suitcase. Them old school ice. Have it out.
Like, so much stuff you can get here still. But like, even like you mentioned the culture and embracing, like never, like right now, right next to me, I have my towels drying on a dryer thing, whatever. Like I actually have a dryer, but it's a washer dryer combo, and it kind of takes forever to dry. So I just air dry my clothes now. Like I wash them, but then I air dry them. I would never. I'd be like, what old ancient stuff is this? But like you said, you embrace the culture of where you're at, and just like be gracious, I would say, because there are so many things that until you're on the ground, you just won't know. So just be gracious with like learning new things and kind of unlearning the way you think you have to exist, whatever. So
And Michelle, we'll drop that PDF in the chat as well. So you'll be able to get that. I know so many people are like, all right. They say, what is it? The most number of heart attacks happen typically on Sunday night, Monday morning. And
oh, I'm sure because people are sitting here preparing for the work week. It's a lot. And I didn't talk about it too much, but like watching my dad pass like right before retirement age. And again, I believe it was stress. He had 3 strokes. The third one is the one that kind of made him immobile. He lost his mobility skills. And then for 6 years, he was immobile, couldn't do anything, couldn't speak, couldn't walk, had to be in a rehab nursing center, 24-hour center. Um, and I was like, I don't ever, and I saw the path I was on and how hard I was working and the amount of stress I was putting on my body. And I was like, you are going to put yourself on the same path if you don't do a shift. So I genuinely believe I've changed the trajectory of my life by doing this change. And that's why I'm so passionate about it and sharing and building app for, building the app for people to get out of the US, because I do think the racial tension caused a lot of stress as well. And it seeps into other things as well, into education and healthcare, all these different things that are impacted by it. So for me, it's really personal, and I really encourage people to just don't be afraid. Just envision your life differently, and don't forget we have access to technology and resources that our parents and other people just didn't have, right? And they figured it out. So you'll be fine. But you just need to make sure that you are trusting in yourself, but also just being strategic, right? Make a plan, stick to the number. Like I said, I changed my lifestyle beforehand, like by moving to a studio and getting rid of my luxury needs, but it was a temporary thing, but it saved me quite a lot of money. And I think that's something that a lot of people, they don't share that part of the journey, right? I'm like, no, share that part so people know how you got to this point, and they don't think that you just, overnight, was able to save however much money that you had to save.
And I think that's a great kind of segue towards that sacrifice
Yeah.
for that change in lifestyle. So definitely if you are like, yeah, I couldn't even really enjoy this 3-day weekend because I was stressed about having to go back to work, or maybe you worked over the weekend and
Mhm.
you're like, I need a moment.
Mhm.
And like you said, you can physically feel the impact of your day-to-day obligations. Start to plan that out. And so if you are, I know I've had some nights where I'm like, I can't even sleep because I'm thinking about all the stuff I got to do.
Yes.
Let's go through it. Let's go through the PDF.
Yeah.
And oh, Michelle, you talked about the fire movement, girl. We talk about that here all the time. And so she talked about, will you
Yeah.
retire early?
Mhm.
And I think I think, especially when you talk about your journey, it's
Mhm.
not necessarily retiring from work, it's moving to different passions. But I'll let you kind of answer that yourself.
Yeah, because so I do desire to retire early. I'm not retired right now, but my plan was, because let's say my early retirement age is 45 or something, right? I'm 36 right now. In my mind, I said I'm going to take many retirements in between until I get there, because that way I get to enjoy the fruits of my labor, right? Along the way. So let's say every 5, so like I do at 35, I do a mini gap year for a year or two. At 40, I'll do another mini gap year, a year or two. And maybe because I'm doing these mini gap years, it takes me to 55 before. But at the same time, I've had these mini gap years and these breaks where I've been able to just exist and breathe. Right. And I would have never been able to actually start my business if I would have never taken the break. I would have never even discovered it, actually, because it came about when I started thinking I was going to be a travel blogger, but then realizing it's really not the travel alone, it's deeper than that. It's actually living abroad, not just these temporary experiences abroad. So, and you can also, for anyone, if you're interested in, like, let's say starting your own company or starting your own business, start building your audience beforehand. Don't wait until you have, like, I put it this way, I was only able to be, in my mind, successful launching that app because I already had a community. So I was doing a series called Xpat Chats, where I would interview Black expats every week. And we just celebrated our 1 year anniversary. So I started that in May of last year. And so when the app came in December of last year, people were already familiar with what I was doing. And so I kind of already had an audience. It wasn't a large audience. You don't need a large audience. I have less than 1,000 people on Xpat Chats. I mean, at the time, sorry, when I launched the app. And then we still have only under 2,000 right now. So I don't want people to think you have to be like this influencer, or you don't need all of that to make an impact and to connect with people. Find out what people need help with and provide that service to them. If that's your area of interest. So for me, I take my passion of wanting people to be exposed about life abroad, and through sharing other people's story on the Expat Chats platform, I feel like I'm fulfilling my passion, right? And also helping people at the same time. So you can start building community. I mean, Rosalind, your group's a perfect example. You started this a year ago, right? And you already have 3,000, but and it's such good content. And again, she's of service, right? Because if you watch the tax one, that was to me my favorite one that I've seen so far in the events that you've done. But she's had, preparing for a divorce. You've had about how to get like digital income, like side income. I mean, there's been so many. If you go through the events tab in Rosalind's page in the group, you can see all of the events and you can see what's upcoming as well. So just think about building community and being of service. If you don't see something or a group that you feel like you can be a part of, then create your own, start your own. Don't be afraid of doing that. And don't be afraid of that one follower that you got to start with. That's going to be like your mom or something. Yeah.
Mama gonna like everything, and invite me because I like everything too. So
Yeah.
And like it and share it, especially for people who are just getting started. That matters so much.
Yes.
Subscribe to their YouTube channels and follow them on Instagram and all these other platforms. It makes a huge difference as you're trying to grow a platform and support and create enough impact to continue the journey and to continue the reach as well. So I just want to say I love what you are doing. I know when I read, I was like, yes, like come on over here. Because really and truly, it's a service, it's a vision, and I'm big on showing what's possible. Because if you look and we look in terms of who we know, we probably don't know nobody in our family that hasn't worked until they died or worked until they worked on some factory floor for 30 years or whatever that might be. And so for many of us, we are the travelers in our family. And that might mean you get your 2 weeks off and you go to some island and enjoy a little bit of time, but seeing more of what's possible and knowing that someone else did it and they can show you that it's possible is huge. And so I definitely want to make sure that we continue to bring that, but I want you to make sure that you're following Shar on Feet Meets Land on IG. You are looking her up on Xpat App, and then we are going to get you that PDF out as well so you can plan your career break as well, because we all need a break sometime, and truly these weekends are not enough. So if you are on the fence trying to decide, make sure that you create your support system and really put a plan in place. And so I want to thank you so much for being with us today. Invaluable. I always say, after a long weekend, you'd be like, this was worse. Like this
No,
made me feel like it was almost good.
No, thank you for the platform. I love what you're doing, and I love that you're sharing and bringing other people into it. Because like I said, a lot of people, they just like, oh, me, and they're the ones talking the whole time instead of like sharing the platform and getting the information that people that they need. Because it's a diverse group of topics that you've covered. And I would love to hear about more fire. I've joined Our Rich Journey. They're a Portugal couple out here, beautiful couple, Black couple. And they have a YouTube channel and they talk about the fire movement. So there's resources out there. And I hope to one day be able to say I am a part of the fire movement in regards to like I have retired early. Yeah, I haven't started officially planning yet, but it's a goal for me. Yeah.
It's coming. I want to thank everybody for being with us, engaging with us. I hope you feel like you are ready and you are setting a date for your break. And definitely check out the events tab. We got some more great speakers coming up as well. And so until next time, I want to thank you all so much. Continue on your journey for financial independence. It is the freedom to live your life on your terms. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night.
Bye.